Hey guys, it's Mike from That's Cool Vintage Collectibles. Do you remember your first concerts? I sure do. We're going to take a look at some of my favorite early concert memories today on the show. Stay tuned. I'm sure many of you have a shoebox or somewhere a drawer full of old concert tickets, and this was one of the first things I actively remember collecting. And when I got into that, I started going to a lot of shows, and I just always saved my ticket. And I always also would type up the set list of the band that I saw and would include that so I remember what songs they played. And nowadays you can actually go online and find those, which is pretty cool. A lot of it's been archived. But I think it's one thing that now, kids today, they're not saving their ticket stubs. There aren't any. It's all digital, it's all on your phone. And for me, a ticket stub is just such a great souvenir of a show, and it's a cool thing to collect. And I certainly remember a lot more once I have the info off that ticket and I look through my book at the set list and things like that. It really comes back to me. So I thought I'd share with you the first 5 shows I saw, because that's kind of how you get started as somebody going to gigs and checking out live bands, and it was a pretty good time. So I started going to gigs in 1998. And my first show was the Rolling Stones in Toronto at the Sky Dome, and the opening act was Wide Mouth Mason, and it was a big show, the whole Sky Dome. It was 60,000 people or something like that, and the Stones were great, and the setup was phenomenal. The stage, all that went into making the spectacle that is the Rolling Stones live. It was such a fun night. And I looked at the ticket. It's $67 to have gone and seen the Stones, which was pretty incredible. So $67 to check out the Stones. They were touring Bridges to Babylon at the time. That was the album that was out. And we had a lot of fun. It was a great night to see. And it really, it was the jump start for me to go and see more live bands. So that was in April of '98. And in July, a Canadian band called April Wine came and played at my hometown and for Canada Day, and that was nice to see them too, because they were such a legendary Canadian band and they put on a good show. 2 days after that one, I went and saw Metallica, and that was in Toronto. And in the afternoon, we went in, and they were doing an interview and kind of taping some stuff at Much Music, which was Canada's version of MTV at the time. So we were really thrilled to go in there. Now, these are the days when you don't have a cell phone. This was all before that. So I had a little camera in my pocket, and I snapped a couple of pictures, but you can't really tell what's going on. It's just, you can get the madness of what was happening and the swarm of kids there trying to see the band. I did get an all right shot of Kirk Hammett and Jason Newsted doing an interview outside the building, which was kind of cool to see. And but at that time, I wasn't really an autograph collector, and I didn't even really attempt that. It was kind of just, I was happy to be there and see the band. The show that night was at the Molson Amphitheater, and the opening acts were Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains, and a band that was doing a lot of like sort of heavier acoustic stuff at the time named Days of the New. They were the other opening act. And this was the Reload tour. And so a lot of people were kind of not a big fan of that album, but I like that album. And the Reload tour was featured heavily in the set list, as well as the Load album. But they did play a lot of classics. They did play Master of Puppets in its entirety, which I know is kind of a rarity these days. So that was pretty cool to see. I do remember the encore, which was Creeping Death. And at the amphitheater, there's sections of seats followed by a lawn section. And I was in seats, and I remember looking back at the lawns during Creeping Death, and I literally thought there was a fence that separated the two. It looked like this fence was going to come down. It was just madness. It was crazy. It was, and as a teenager, it was great. It was pretty wild, and it was loud, and it just felt very very cool to be a part of. So it was such a scene. Now that show cost me $44.25 back then to see Metallica. So that was the first time I saw Metallica. It was pretty good. And they actually did an acoustic set during that show, which was kind of a rare thing. But at the time, some of their newer material had that undertone going. So they actually played Four Horsemen acoustically at that gig, which was pretty cool. So that was a very fun show. Later in the fall of that year, I went and saw Eric Clapton back at the Sky Dome, but this was what they called the Sky Tent, which was just half the stadium with sort of a separation that you couldn't get to the other half. And the opening act of that show was Bonnie Raitt. And I remember he opened with Crossroads, which was pretty cool. And Bonnie Raitt was great too, and the show was wonderful. The sound in the Sky Dome's a bit iffy, but it was quite a fun night to see those two, Rock and Roll Hall of Famers together on one bill. That was a great show. Nothing much over the winter, and then later in '99, in the following July, I went for the first time and saw Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and there's my ticket to that show, which was July 6th, 1999, for the Echoes tour, and the opening act of that show was Lucinda Williams, and it was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. I was a Tom Petty fan, but seeing him live really made me a bigger fan. And this was around the time he was doing that run at the Fillmore and all that. It was kind of when the Heartbreakers were really, really at a good spot. They sounded excellent, and that ticket was $59 to see Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. So there you go. I do remember that one. The crowd was a little bit intense at that one. I remember leaving, and it was kind of you could feel the place was going to go up at any moment. It just felt like that crowd was not too stable. But it was a fun night, and I really enjoyed. Some of those early shows are just some of my favorite memories, because these are the first times I'd seen live rock and roll with the volume and the lights and the crowd, and it just it got me hooked for life. I continue to go. Nowadays, I prefer smaller venues, and stadium shows are okay. I think pricing's gotten a bit out of hand for shows like that. I'm glad I've seen who I've seen, and it's a bit of a time capsule now that I don't think live bands are going to ever take the place of the ones that my generation and the ones before it got to go see, because these bands are going to be, I think, years and years from now, we're going to look at 1950 through to 2000, let's say, as a bit of a renaissance period in art and music and culture and technology and everything else. I think we're going to see that not a lot of other times in history had this much change. But who knows? We'll see. Time will tell. So those are some of my earliest concert memories, and just great to go through some of these old tickets and see. I'd love to know what your earliest concerts were. Leave in the comments anything that you remember of these early concerts that you went to, and some of your favorite early shows. I'd love to see that. So thanks very much for watching, and the channel continues to grow. I very much appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Keep on collecting.